Welcome back, everyone, and hello to our Zoom audience. Thank you for joining us. Tonight, we have Neil Surkan and Laurie D reading from their new work, which is very exciting. Neil Surkan is the author of 3 poetry collections from McGill-Queen's University Press, Empties, his new book, Unbecoming and On High, as well as the chapbooks Die, Workbook, from the Blasted Tree, Ruin from Knife Fork Book, Their Queer Tenderness, also from Knife Fork Book, and Super, Natural from Anstruther Press. A professor in the Department of English at Vancouver Island University. He is the Poet Laureate of Nanaimo, BC. Please welcome Neil Surkan.
Hi, everyone. Oh, I heard this is finicky. Let's see.
It's imperfect.
We're okay?
Yeah. Do you want me to help?
Thanks for having me. I realized the bill for this reading changed kind of last minute, and I'm so thrilled to have responded to my first ever poetry emergencies. Thank you. Thanks, Kira. May there be no more, but emergencies. This is my new collection called Empties, and it's got this little skipping stone, and then the splash has this little kind of phantasmal face. And the cover is like very yellow. At least I'm impressed by its like kind of loud nature compared to the way these poems might feel. And yet that interplay of kind of joy and alarm seems to kind of pervade this collection. So in the end, I'm grateful to David Drummond for finding the right way through the representation of these poems. I want to start by reading the epigraph, and that's from Henri Cole. Oh, it slides. Yeah, that's it. Oh. Yeah. That's not the epigraph.
That would be good.
Yeah, it slides. Yeah, y'all can have it. This is from Henri Cole's poem Recycling in his collection Blizzard. Where there's danger, there also grows something to save us. This is the first part of a poem called Vessel. The only word that might be useful to know if you haven't heard it before is the word nostalgia, which is a feeling of nostalgia for a time when light pollution didn't exist, and so one could see more stars. Vessel. I'd sometimes pray while holding my breath to shove the want into life like a thick letter through a mail slot. Now I'm plugged between larynx and lungs. Forgive me for reading so softly. An ant who, rather than stamped, finds himself lost in a maze of the boot's tread. Clinging, agog. At every frayed edge, I take the damage and write with my finger in the ash, which, like breath on glass, only appears to be a film. Space persists between charred motes of wood, leaf, fur, bone. Anyway, those stars, more than microplastics in our blood. And what's flecking my irises? Nostalgia, swimming the reservoir, tears bright with satellite gleam. In margins for error, death crouches like a cut block tucked from view of the highway. Cresting Moonrock Bluff, I gazed on aftermath, a mule deer grazing on seedlings dibbled by teens between the stumps. Anyway, I said, what about faith? The call had dropped. How much more could he hear before I was lost? How much would he hear? I hope my body contains me, so when it dies, I can slip into a breeze of sentience as from a vessel broken toward you, or through, or for. This is another first part of a long poem called The Deep, and I was like, how would I introduce this poem? I think this poem is basically about my phone. So I'll take a crack at it. Also, Lacan shows up, and you'll see my relationship to him, I think. The deep. My lines have been shrinking. Now, while writing, I tingle at the thought of checking my phone and there being something happening. A shitpost or delivered package glazed with rain on the stoop. But of course, the moment I forced its flaps apart, the box would plummet downward like the laundry chute in my parents' home. Marine wafts of clumpy tide and sweat hanging in the dark as from another train I failed to catch. In the margins of my paper on Lacan, the prof scrawled, "Wow, just wow." No, I hadn't read the book. Too much gravity bomb was spurting through my hands. Of all the people I knew back then who studied dubstep production, one has 1 million followers now, reacting to reaction vids by strangers recapping bad dates and meals. Her plied mouth in each thumbnail makes "oh" or "oof" ring light, Saturning her pupils' frozen worlds. My poems used to melt in curious pools like ice cubes for a sill-top orchid that, once bloomless, became a twig jabbed in perlite. Ice bright blue light off a screen, however, never wavers. Past midnight, it draws me half asleep into its mouth. Angler fish that croons, "Come here, the deep is not so dark and deep." I was lucky enough to get to talk with Kieran today for a podcast, and my voice is a little bit quieter even than usual. But with so much gratitude for that time, Kieran. This is one of the poems called Empties in the collection. Empties. And who isn't my neighbor now? We alley bottles mouthing "woo" when gusts prowl. Empties blown into a chorus. Wind, song. What difference if air grazes or emits from our lips? Aren't all voices lifted, stolen? Have not we all awoken, tossed in drifts, or on unshrinking mountains of rink snow? Stranger, kin, as this weather draws us together by drawing our low moans, be just, be unjust, just be drawn, lest we both. I haven't read some of these poems in public before. Y'all okay? You can hear them okay? This is happening? Yeah? This is real life. This poem is called Ruin. I'd like to dedicate it to my friend Kirby, who has really just kind of illuminated some parts of my life. Yeah, so this is for them. Ruin. A slanted shadow through the unshuttered window of a slump-raftered barn we'd drive past on Sundays, late for skiing on the mountain scars, was all I needed to start believing a bull lived there, boxed in and brooding on the ring bored through his face and on his horns pruned off plateaus with the dormant violence of a volcano whose craters capped with campsites, a gazebo. Queer, I learned to inspirit broken places. Wanting grace so badly for myself, I filled every opening. This poem refers to a poem by Seamus Heaney, where Heaney uses the word unhomesick, which I was like, whoa, you can do that. The other thing that is I have learned regionally specific is the screamer, which is a mixture of slush and soft serve ice cream. And it was like a very prized beverage in the Okanagan where I grew up. Yeah. Unhomesickness. The good, nauseous nostalgia that flickers up the ribs seam before a voice whispers, never return. For screamers say their flagrant colors, blue raspberry slush slagged through by ice cream, more like margarine than milk, crunchy with sugar. A plastic cup for $2 put the body in shock. Kerosene on candles surge, a reckless jolt of crude power. Once, with Sylphic, shy Richard, the screamer high got us rolling stones down the bluff into a garden party, payloads increasing in size until we had to heft together, thrusting at the scaly texture, crashes of juniper, June grass, the kidney-shaped pool. Richard, who, years later, was filmed mid-ballet exam, his movements sanguine and sure. The tape dispensed across 10th grade, a phase in their program of his torture. Reading Heaney's Law Nur, which ends with cold caramels bought from Sharky's counter, I remember screamers and Richard with this swoop of fondness. But a gift I gave my father back one summer from school deadheads the homesickness. Heaney selected how he leafed a few pages and blurted, "Is this guy gay or something?" And I replied, "Maybe. I'm pretty sure." This poem has a palimpsestic boulder. Some of you, I think, have heard me read this before. So, Lauren, I think you were there. Outside of Karamias, there's this very large boulder that has been, no need to like show hands or anything, but on the side of the highway, there's this huge boulder that has been tagged for years and years by, I assume, teenagers. There's all kinds of obscene stuff on there, but also some interesting like glimmers of desire and also some moments of memorial. So this palimpsestic boulder shows up. That's all you need to know. Time to apologize to your mother, you realize, driving past the scree outside Karamias. Those vestiges of the mountains coming out. No, down. The shale's clustered beaks bagging among wild rye and tumbleweeds, invasive, prone to making everywhere their home, like shame. The slide faces look tear-streaked, even when you aren't projecting, and in a pullout tucked below a palimpsestic boulder, R.I.P. MIT, F you Tom you. A foot-long homemade sign reads, no stopping at any time. She interrupts you before you can choke forth the sorries corked below your throat because you seem to have forgotten she's your mom. Glance up from your toes clawing the aggregate patio. When did her hair turn silver? Survivor of the death of her own mother, harborer of her own longings, her own secrets. Have you ever really looked into her eyes? No stopping, the kettle screeches at any time. But when you finally go inside and lift it from the fire, it's empty. This poem is called Brackish. Sorry, brackish. Stuck at the back. It's called brackish. Yes, it is both river and sea. Yes, they mingle together here. Yes, one empties for the other. Yes, it tastes like tears. Limits. I show my son how to brush an anemone so it sucks its tentacles back. Firework in reverse. Soon he's poked shut every polyp glued to the rock pool's rim like a bad therapist. We wait. Gradually they reemerge, fig green and scar pink feelers, the way hope can't be helped, shy and then ravenous. One pool over, a girl his age flings whatever she can catch into the air. Crabs, a sculpin, dash upon the stones and quiver. I explain there are limits to what I can save, to what's proper. He yells, stop. Thanks so much for having me tonight. I'm so honored to be here and to be back in this space. It's such a treat to read this particular series. I'm genuinely agog at like how much work you do curating this series and welcoming us all in. So thanks, Karen. Yeah. Likewise, I also am always so happy to see you, Zoe, and thanks for also being a mainstay of this reading. Yeah. And thanks for having me, Laurie. Can't wait to hear your work. Yeah. And also, importantly, and in huge letters here, this exact phrasing, thanks to all of you. Like, truly, I'm so grateful to see you, but I can't believe I didn't say that already. This poem is also called Empties. Empties. Just as the sun leans to empty at Piper's Lagoon, and, by emptying, invests itself in the water's darkening, the water's separateness, a substance turned body, licking dry land clean of dullness. I'm emptying myself for you, little caster. Watching you scour the rack and spume for rocks worth plunking through the dimming waves, I'm prematurely moved to teach the skipping throw. Hooked index finger, throat soft elbow crook, a sudden flick for spin. Improbable, I know, but out over the deep, if inked true, between the tidal swells and fairy wakes, even a heavy stone might stave off this sinking feeling and float.
Wow, such a treat. I'm so grateful that you were available to come this Friday. Yeah, just gorgeous. I got to hear a couple of those poems today, and so, when you hear a poem a second time and you hear things that you didn't hear the first time, it's so cool. And now, of course, I want to read it. Read them all. Thank you, Neil. Laurie D. Graham's first book, Rove, was shortlisted for the Gerald Lampert Memorial Award. Her second and third books, Settler Education and Fast Commute, were both nominated for Ontario's Trillium Award for Poetry. In her new collection, Calling It Back to Me, Laurie traces the story of her great-grandmother's lives before and after they left their homelands and settled on this continent, striving to understand how she came to be here and writing the act of colonization as it exists in her own family history. Please welcome Laurie D. Graham.
Thank you, Karen. Hi, everyone. Finicky mic has been arranged. It's so nice to be here. It's so nice to read at this series. I read my first poems aloud at Planet Earth Poetry some 20 years ago when I was going to school here, and the open mic was storied then. I don't know how old this open mic is, but
30 years.
There we are, 30 years. So it was a mere 10 years old when I first read poems of this. I'm really glad to be back, and I jump at every chance to be back in Victoria. I'm going to read from my new book. It contains 4 long poems, earlier iterations of which were a chapbook of the same name, also called Calling It Back to Me, which were published by Deer Mountain Pages. The poems arranged themselves into 4 longer sequences in this book. I'll probably just read the first few pages and then traipse into reading a great-grandmother poem, and then, if you'll indulge me, I'll read one of the long poems in its entirety. I recently learned that Neil and I share some relatives. We share a great aunt. We share some cousins. So I'll read the poem that is Aunt Elma's mother-in-law. That is my trying to understand who she was. But first, this book came about for a few different reasons, one of which was my aunt had dementia, and I was the person that she was handing heirlooms and family stories to. These moth-bitten sort of stories were coming to me, and I at the same time was trying to realize learn a little bit more about the sort of concrete stories or the material substance of my family's immigration to this continent and the reasons for it, to try to know better the silences that surrounded that move, because particularly on my mother's side, relatives from Ukraine, if anyone asked them, usually their children, my great-grandparents, if anyone asked them, what are the circumstances of your coming here? What's the name of the town that you're from? Who did you leave? The answer would be, why do you want to know? That's the past. They were intent on making a pretty hard break, which is a sort of vacuum that we've felt over the years as a family, compelled to fill, just to fictionalize a story for why that silence. So that's these kind of meandering things that I'm talking about, where I was kind of honing in on the book through these means. So this is Calling It Back to Me. The purple hills, the busy work of robins through the Saskatoons, the photos sorted by who's in them, boxes with big labels she can no longer read. What might be heirlooms, wristwatch, pocket watch, handkerchief, chisel, a darning mushroom, a tin of teaspoons. Still, the urge is for story. She wants to give. A bright yellow moon rises in her mind. A small pink curl of cloud. No language for any of it. Edges of the photographs disintegrating. Names on the census misspelled. Creases erasing the facts from the birth certificate. The town history's broken spine. The story as he told it in his last years from a distance. All this is coming into my hands. A one-word answer on an immigration form becomes our imagined founding, what we say about our being here. How they listed off the ships. 2 chests, belongings gone now, but the chests remain. Seeming crapshoot of names until you consider why these are erased and these retained, which names are carried by many at once, why we don't just have our own to carry. Touching a photograph to discern what she might have been thinking. We forget the names of the towns they left. We don't forget the countries. Borders heave. We don't write. Sometimes a family doesn't have a story keeper. Just a married name, a father's name on a document. Men providing the record, cataloged by their labor, fishers, farmers, a market gardener, a teacher. How the women reach out to me now. The ones who took to the ocean alone. Forever I'll be leaving. Forever I'll be cutting the straight-lined genealogy. 2 begets 1, 2, then 1. Files, scans, software growing obsolete as it maps. Photos of moss on stone, on letters and numbers. You take plastic flowers if you're not going to be there often. And what do I do if I'm visiting like this? Lily McCluckin, arrived April 28, 1923, age 27. Hard to affix the number of L's in her name. Where the middle name came from. Why GH is pronounced CK. The place she was born told again and again wrongly, I think. She names it differently on the ship's manifest, names slippery, multiple, but with great conviction, they're told. A letter from the church recommending her family to the same church in the new place. Sailing across with 2 toddlers and 8 months pregnant, and not a word from her survives. She had different ideas about things. And a hot temper that got passed down to my aunt, a resemblance spoken about with only half-joking concern. You couldn't get her off an idea once it bloomed in her, couldn't see a bright future with the bit of land they had, Northern Ireland in the 1920s, and not a word. How did she sound when she spoke? What did she talk about? Her eldest daughter teaches her children, her grandchildren, that they came from a place it appears they never lived in. All her brothers already here, and cousins and uncles, then husband, then her, a siphoning. Her brother's shack, his madness, his suicide. Things weren't prosperous, so what do? The advertisements everywhere for as long as she could remember. Western Canada, the new El Dorado. Until that point, she had been the one who stayed. The blank of her lands here. The manner of smirk when she's described as eccentric. The impenetrable photos. The eyes behind the glasses, the curled hair, the stiff dresses. What could she tell beyond a distance? Toward an origin story. These first lines, I can't help but read them in my granny's voice, so I apologize for the impression I'm about to do. I should also mention, I want to tell everyone about this person. Robert Angelic gets mentioned in this poem. Andjelic, go Google him. He's the biggest, he owns the most farmland in Canada, and he wants to get into water next. Toward an origin story. But he's, as he says, he's 74, and I'm only one guy. I have to, he might not be able to get into water. It might be okay. Toward an origin story. Under Russia's boot, under England's boot, they sailed off to become the boot of the plains, stamping out the grasses and trees, investment companies bulldozing the windbreaks, filling in the sloughs, flattening hills and houses, seeding the ditches, every arable pilfered inch. The settlement story going sour in the heat and the haze. I repeat a tight-lipped past. Repeat what? Repeat, why do you want to know? Repeat place names misremembered. And Russia, England. Repeat 160 acres as Angelic rounds $250,000. the ever-shrinking parcels that drove us onto the ships, with means enough to carry ourselves over, with toddlers, tools, letters recommending us, relatives to catch us, name and relation, what will you do here, farmhand or domestic? With means enough, but only in concert, or after some years, or after inheritance, to put up the fee, plow, dig, acquire, progress, and pass down to what progeny remains? How can I speak for this? For pride is what blooms, and what we must today contend with, bringing to bear the sloughs have been dry for some years now, the soil long spent, that nearly all of us tapped out, took off to the cities, and the addiction to booze that threads through the families, prized equipment that ate up all those fingers, or worse, the progeny who didn't survive and are buried there in plots untended, all the daily pain elided by their beneficiaries, relieved simply to have survived, to have been thrown clear. What's said is brief by design. An echo surrounds it and everything else besides. Ship of opportunity, they say. Ship of labor without being mastered, they say. Money not necessary and riches profuse, the trees and soil and water waiting here for you. What words they used on the border guard. How they thought of the sovereign's desire for their toil. The maps show only the colonizing program. These people go here and these here, this pitch to this country in these meager years. And we repeat on land the wake they threw, the churned grasses, the raised overburden, our flimsy structures anchored into exposed clay, new landforms reached in 8 days, new sounding of your name, new topography and climate, but the people here will be your people. You're not going it alone, not totally. New food, new trees, new distance, new implements, land to locate and work, accept, same toil ever, same insistent replication, same haunting, same need, same lack, same dangle over the edges of life while a mute love, a love with no past and no grounding, blossoms in the children. Not for sod roof or log structure, not that nostalgia. Not for who and what they arrived to, who they displaced, what right they were told, then believed they had. I couldn't stop crying during the funeral mass. The harmonies lodged in the early recesses in a language never taught to me, never spoken to me. All of us filing past my grandfather in his suit, in his coffin, in his church, the lunch he paid for us to have, warming in the basement. I knew then I'd have to work the rest of my life to call it back, and I'm too late wanting to conserve what died with him, of this place and of the home place we never knew. I've grown so suspicious of narrative, of gathering names, dates, scans of records of existence and movement, coordinates, couplings, offspring, deaths, that counting, that yield, trying hard to retain it so it can be passed along, that paper trail we refer to as heritage, that we really did exist there, but came to partake of this treating of future as limitless, an obligation as something you hold only to your own. Still, in certain quarters, to stay put is failure. To know in spite of erasure, of break, is failure. Not the mythology, but the massive unvoiced strains. The stubborn streak, working till you drop, doing otherwise within a crushing rubric. A back's sideways curve, protruding ribs and shoulder blades, The way we gaze across an expanse with one brow furrowed, rhythm as first language, jaws that clench in the night and ache in the day, engines like sweet apocalypse, prayer like manifesto with heat and water and the signals coming in fine. Carrying their letters, these heirlooms in my bag through the airport. Security more interested in the water left in the bottle. Don't forget about us, that you have a family in the old country. Volodya is already in the army. The woman in the photo whose face looks like my grandmother's, escaping the bombed out building. The man in a news story with my great uncle's name staying put through the invasion. The legions needing more than what the world is giving them and saying so. Stealing from the withholding world. Expressing doubt about the righteous. Longing for education. Despising education. Not wanting to marry. Wanting to marry the wrong one. Finding herself alone with all these children. That I've felt I could make some good of this is an attribute attractive to the state. Its schemes of land mechanized as the water rises or vanishes as the storm obscures all horizons. And it seems on the face so hard to imagine their leaving. The parting scene. Who was there? What they did or didn't say. Yet here I am so far from home. So far from the city nearest where they bought and farmed and left, living their inheritance, with my own unspoken parting story, hooking my strings between points on the globe, expecting answers. Thank you.